All right, so in order to graph sine, cosine, and tangent, and all that, you need to know the unit circle. And so there are a couple basic points of the unit circle that you need to know. You need to know 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. So our main parts of the unit circle I will label. So this is 0, and the point here is 1 comma 0, right? This point here is pi over 2, which is at 0 comma 1. This point is negative 1, 0, which represents pi. This point is 0 comma negative 1, which represents 3 pi over 2. And this is also considered 2 pi. And so when you're taking a look at a coordinate, the first value represents your cosine value, and then the second value represents sine. And so there are 5 basic values of the unit circle that you need to make sure you know. So I'm going to put these into a chart so you have them. So the chart for cosine of theta, or cosine of x, okay, is as follows. So our x values are going to be 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And so if I were to go around the circle, this is my 1. Okay, all right, this is my cosine value, 1. My next value for cosine is 0. Next value is negative 1. Next value is 0. Next value is 1. Right? And so I can use the same thing to create it for my sine values. So my sine values are going to be the y values. So let's go ahead and take a look at all of the y's. So they are as follows. 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. Okay, so those are my 5 y values. So then, as I'm going to graph it, the graph of cosine of x, okay, will always have 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi, right? So then, I know it goes from 1 to negative 1, so I just need to plot these points. So these are the points that I'm looking to plot 0, 1, pi over 2, 0, pi negative 1, 0, and 1. And where am I coming up with these points? I'm looking at this section of the table. Okay? And so that is what your cosine curve always looks like, and it's always at those 5 main values. So now the graph of sine is going to be the same thing at 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And so I'm going to have a value of 1 and a value of negative 1. Okay? So now I'm taking a look at 0 comma 0, pi over 2 comma 1, pi comma 0, and hopefully you're catching the hang of it. And so this is the curve of sine of x. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. And so the main idea is that you understand what the curves are looking like of cosine and sine. So the main idea here is that you are going to take sine and cosine values and you are looking to move them based on certain information of a graph. Okay, so let's go over the possible transformations. So that graph will always be a curve. You're going to either condense it or expand it. It's going to get taller. It's going to move up and down. All these different ideas. Okay, so given y equals a sine of x plus c plus d. Okay, a is your amplitude, and so that is what you're multiplying by. Okay, c is a horizontal shift. So you will move your values. I'll kind of go over it in a second. And then D represents your vertical shift. Okay, so if I were to take, I'm going to talk about sine. It applies the same way to cosine. So if I'm going to take my sine values, so this is my my x value, and then this is going to be my sine value. Okay, so if I take that 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. and I fill in my table. Okay, now how do these affect the changes? So your C value will always affect whatever that X value is. So if it's a plus C, a plus C means you would subtract whatever your C value is, because this means left. Okay? Now if it's a minus C, that would mean right, so you would add C. And I'm talking about the X minus C. Okay? So you're only changing your X values. You're only moving it, shifting it. Now A and D affect these values. So to find where it would transform to, you would multiply this value by A and then add whatever your D value is. So I take my A value times 1 and then add D. My A value times 0, add D. My A value times -1, add D. My A times 0, add D. Okay? And so C will change your X values, A and D will change your sine values. Same thing with cosine. Okay, so at any point if you need to stop this video, make sure you do so. Okay, so I'll go over an example. Let me pull up an example that you gave me. Okay, so y equals cosine of x minus 1. Okay, so what you're going to do is you are going to graph your normal cosine graph. So again, my normal cosine graph I went over earlier are going to be at these 5 points, right? So now I need to read what the transformation tells me. And so this transformation tells me a -1, which this means this is going to move everything down 1. So what this means is this point needs to go down 1. Okay, so move down 1. This point needs to 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 move down 1. And so this is my new function. This is the new one. Okay? Now, if I were to go back to the same example now, so now this time I'm doing y equals 2 cosine of x plus, I don't know, 3. Okay, same exact thing. I have to plot those same points every time. And again, I'm going faster because you can hit pause at any point. Right? Okay, so now what this is telling me to do is that I need to multiply my value by 2 and then add 3. So this reads to multiply by 2 and add 3. So I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to do some scratch work over here. So this is the scratch work. Okay, so I have my values of 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. Right? 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. So now what it's telling me to do is I need to take this value of 1, multiply it by 2, and then add 3 to it. So 2 times 1 plus 3 is 5. So this value is actually going to move all the way up to 5. Okay? Next one, I need to do the same thing. 2 times 0 plus 3 is 3. So my next value is actually going to move all the way up to 1, 2, 3. All right, same thing. 2 times -1 plus 3. That is equal to 1. Okay, so I need to move this value all the way up to 1. Okay, and so this will be the same values. This will be 3 and 5 because, notice, they match up. So this becomes 3, this one becomes 5. And boom, I transform my function. Okay. You would do the same thing with sine, but remember, sine has different values, so that's why it would become just a tad bit different. All right, let's see what else you have listed. All right, so that's how you do an amplitude and a period. Now let's go ahead and change the x value here. So let's talk about some shifts. So now we're going to call these shifts. So I'm going to go back to my cosine value, or I'll do sine this time. So y equals sine of x plus pi over 2. Okay, so first I need to graph normal sine. So I got to put my main points. Right, and these are the main points I need to have memorized. Okay, so if it's sine, cool. Now I need to transform my function. And so what this is telling me to do is that I need to move left pi over 2 units. So what this point now needs to do is actually move left. This point needs to move left, this point needs to move left, this point needs to move left, and this point needs to move left. So my first point is actually going to start at a negative pi over 2. Okay? And this point needs to move left 1, this point needs to move left, this point needs to move back 1, and this point needs to move back 1. And this is my moved function. Right? Because it tells me to move left pi over 2, so that means I am just sliding it over by pi over 2. And that's what it becomes. Okay, so I want you to start with just learning sine and cosine because you need to know these really well. So now from here, go ahead and do whatever practice or homework you have, and then we can kind of go from there.